I think one of the funniest game genres to exist is digital pinball. But I say this in a good way because for about a year now, I've found myself coming back again and again to play Pokemon Pinball Ruby and Sapphire Edition whenever I seem to have some downtime. While waiting for the doctor, I pull out my phone and play Pokemon Pinball. On break at work, Pokemon Pinball. Serving my civilian responsibilities for 9 hours of jury duty, Pokemon Pinball. But as I was searching the internet for some games, I came across a few more Nintendo published pinball games that I thought I'd want to shed some light to. 1984, Pinball. Pinball for the NES was developed by Nintendo and HAL Laboratory and was based on the prior year's Game & Watch game, also known as Pinball. The premise is simple, it's pinball. Do I need to explain? You get to play on one table that has 2 levels to it, as well as a bonus level you can unlock which stars Mario and Pauline from the original Donkey Kong arcade cabinet. There are ways to unlock stoppers for the board, such as hitting 7 targets on the side and even hatching all the eggs right above the flippers. Then you can also turn the board yellow by turning all the cards faced over. And that's pretty much the most basic pinball game for the NES. 1993, Kirby's Pinball Land. Kirby's Pinball Land for the original Game Boy was developed by HAL Laboratory as Kirby's first spin-off and secondary Game Boy game. The game stars Kirby, obviously, but this time as the pinball itself. The game is made up of 3 different stages: Wispy Woods, Kracko, and Poppy Bros. Each features 3 levels to them and a final boss level at the very top. Upon beating all 3 of these bosses, you are faced to challenge King DDD as the final boss. Throughout each stage, there are a handful of gimmicks that are used in order to get Kirby to the top boss level, such as characters that literally throw you and warp stars that can instantly teleport you upward. If the player ends up falling through the flippers on the bottom level, an extra chance is given through a springboard where you can send Kirby back onto the game stage with the well-timed press of the A button. This is when the pinball games really start to roll. 1999, Pokemon Pinball. Pokemon Pinball for the Game Boy Color was developed by Jupiter based on Pokemon Red and Blue. The 2 games were the basis for each playable location on the table. Using a Pokeball as a pinball, and depending on what location of the game you're set in, for instance, Pallet Town, Cerulean City, the Safari Zone, each table had a unique set of mechanics and Pokemon you'd be able to catch. Both tables were given lanes at the top, which gave the player the ability to unlock a slots bonus in the middle of the table. By shooting a ball into the middle hole, a slot reel would spin around revealing available bonuses such as bonus points, ball savers and extras, upgrades, and the ability to start different modes. The modes included Catch Mode and Evolution Mode as side objectives with 2-minute windows in which the player would have to either pop bumpers or hit targets in order to catch or evolve a Pokemon. On top of these 2 modes, the player was able to unlock bonus stages that allowed for more points to be scored. The red table having Diglett and Gengar stages, the blue table having Meowth and Seal stages, and both having Mewtwo stages. The core idea of these bonus stages were just to hit the Pokemon on the table, but each having different outcomes when doing so. The game featured a rumble ability with the help of a AAA battery in the cartridge, which I think things like this were so cool. And there was no true storyline to the game, but to achieve higher scores and catching every Pokemon you could, this game was truly made for its replayability. 2001, Pokemon Pinball Mini. Pokemon Pinball Mini was another game developed by Jupiter, but this time it was created for the Pokemon Mini, which was a mini handheld by Nintendo that only played a collection of Pokemon mini games. Pinball Mini had a total of 90 levels, and the objective of all of them was to fill holes with Pokeballs. Different levels had different elements to them, such as bumpers, blocks, and even gravity changers to either hinder or assist the player in succeeding. Upon every 10 levels, the player was able to capture 5 Pokemon: Pikachu, Clefairy, Wobbuffet, and Poliwag to assist in later levels. Pokemon Pinball Mini was just one of the 10 exclusive mini-games that were available to Nintendo's Pokemon Mini, which leads us into the next pinball game of the series. 2003, Pokemon Pinball Ruby and Sapphire, aka my favorite. Pokemon Pinball Ruby and Sapphire for the Game Boy Advance was the second installment of the original Pokemon Pinball, developed once again by Jupiter. The game had the same basis as the last, except this time, the 2 playable tables were now based on Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire with tons of new features. Depending on the map location, of course, the player is now able to catch all regional Hoenn Pokemon, totaling up to 205 obtainable Pokemon. As well as new Pokemon, new bonus stages were able to be played on as well. The Ruby field had Kecleon and Groudon bonus stages, the The Sapphire field had Dusclops and Kyogre bonus stages, and both fields had the Rayquaza bonus stage upon beating legendaries on each other bonus stage. Once again, all playing like the original Pokemon Pinball in the sense that you have to hit the Pokemon on the board with Pokeballs. On top of all this, eggs were now able to be hatched when hitting certain objects on the field. Small appearances from Latios and Latias are shown as ball sabers, and even a Pokemon is available if the player can reach it. With coins being obtained on the field, the player was now able to buy ball sabers, extra timers, and even upgrades for the field. Because the game came out on the Game Boy Advance, a few new controller features were added as well. You were now able to shake the table with the use of the shoulder buttons. Playing the game through the GameCube's Game Boy player actually used rumble in the controller, and the Japanese version of the game actually had e-reader compatibility. There are literally so many more little features that I didn't mention that I think this has got to be the prime way to play Pokemon Pinball. 2004 Mario Pinball Land. Mario Pinball Land was released for the Game Boy Advance and developed by Fuse Games. This game actually has a storyline. Mario and Princess Peach go to an amusement park and are waiting in line for a ride called the Sphericizer, which turns you into a ball and has a cannon shoot you at a target. As Princess Peach is about to take her turn, a couple of Goombas kidnap her and shoot her towards Bowser's castle. This calls for Mario to use the Sphericizer to turn into a pinball in order to save Princess Peach. The game has 5 different Mushroom Kingdom themed pinball stages in which Mario must explore, and within each stage, there are different levels with a variety of enemies, all having their own difficulties when it comes to beating them. Each stage uses the Super Mario 64 method of advancing, in which you must collect a certain amount of stars in order to open new doors. At the end of every level, there are bosses you must defeat. This includes Petey Piranha, Big Boo, Tootin' Koopa, and Cheep Cheep Pufferfish. Upon defeating these bosses, the player obtains star keys, ultimately unlocking golden statues in Bowser's castle, which leads to the final boss level, going against none other than Bowser. As you play through each level, you can obtain different items such as mushrooms, pipes to block falling, invincibility stars, lightning, and even eggs. With every enemy defeated as well, coins are dropped and can be used in Toad's shop, where you can also buy these items. The game was pretty much received as having nice graphics at the time, but entirely not worth the playthrough, as it seemed to have been a step down from Pokemon Pinball Ruby and Sapphire. Honestly, it's just a small Mario spin-off that was made for casual play. 2005 Metroid Prime Pinball. Metroid Prime Pinball was released for the Nintendo DS and developed by, once again, Fuse Games. The company figured, hey, if Mario Pinball worked, why don't we use a character that can actually morph into a ball? The game features 6 different pinball tables, each being inspired by areas from Metroid Prime for the GameCube. Because this game was made for the DS, both screens were in use, as you would be able to see the top half of the table and the bottom half as well. Much like the GameCube game, Metroid Prime Pinball is loosely based on the events in Metroid Prime. The player must obtain 12 artifacts, which are achieved through completing minigames or by beating bosses in each level. Once all 12 artifacts are acquired, the player is able to play on what is known as the Artifact Temple. In the Artifact Temple, the player must hit 12 different targets whilst being attacked by Meta Ridley. Once completing this challenge, the final table is unlocked, in which the player must defeat the final boss, the Metroid Prime. Everything about this game seemed to have been well praised by the public, so whilst Mario Pinball wasn't working out too well for Fuse, this game redeemed them. There are many more pinball games published by Nintendo, but to be honest, they all seem like throwaway pinball games, so I decided to only stick to the ones with Nintendo IPs. Out of all of them though, I think Ruby and Sapphire has to be at the top of the list for how simple the gameplay is and the amount of replayability it has. And yeah, those are pretty much the Nintendo pinball games that I found which use Nintendo IPs. Subscribe for more.